"Don't be so dramatic, Helen. It's just a joke." Those were the words my future daughter-in-law said when I found a trash can sitting where my seat was supposed to be at my own son's wedding. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't make a scene. I simply smiled, adjusted the pearl necklace my late husband had given me on our 30th anniversary, and sat down in a folding chair near the back wall. What none of them knew was that inside my purse rested a sealed envelope that would change the entire day. I'm Helen Carter, 68 years old, and until that afternoon, I believed there was no humiliation my family could inflict that would truly surprise me. The wedding was being held at a beautiful country club outside Nashville. The ceremony overlooked rolling green hills, and white roses lined the aisle in neat arrangements. Guests mingled beneath elegant tents while waiters carried trays of sparkling drinks and appetizers. It looked like the perfect wedding. Most people probably thought it was. I had arrived early, wearing a pale blue dress and comfortable low heels. My silver hair had been styled carefully that morning, and for the first time in months, I had allowed myself to feel proud. After all, this was my son Ryan's wedding day. I remembered the little boy who used to run through our backyard chasing fireflies in the summer. I remembered helping him with school projects at the kitchen table and cheering at every baseball game. Watching him get married was supposed to be one of the happiest moments of my life. As I entered the reception hall, I searched for the table assignments. Guests were already finding their seats. I located table 1, where immediate family members were supposed to sit. My eyes scanned the place cards. Then I froze. My assigned chair was gone. In its place stood a silver trash can decorated with a large white bow. Taped to the front was a printed label, "Mother of the Groom." For a moment, I honestly thought there had been some kind of mistake. Perhaps a vendor had misplaced something. Perhaps it was part of a setup waiting to be completed. Then I heard laughter behind me. I turned and saw Vanessa standing with 3 bridesmaids. One of them was holding up a phone, clearly recording. "Do you like it?" Vanessa asked with a grin. "We thought it would be hilarious." The women laughed again. I looked toward Ryan. He was standing nearby in his tuxedo. Surely he would stop this. Surely he would realize how hurtful it was. Instead, he shook his head and gave a nervous chuckle. "Mom, relax," he said. "It's just a joke." I felt something shift inside me then. Not anger, not even sadness, just clarity. The kind that arrives after years of making excuses for people who no longer deserve them. I folded the small place card that had my name on it and slipped it into my purse. Then I smiled. "Of course," I said softly. "It's your day." Vanessa looked almost disappointed by my reaction. Perhaps she had expected tears. Perhaps she wanted an argument she could later describe as proof that I was difficult. Instead, I quietly accepted a spare chair from a confused staff member and moved to the back of the room. From there, I watched the celebration unfold. Music played. Guests laughed. Glasses clinked together. No one noticed the envelope resting inside my purse. No one noticed that I kept touching it occasionally, reassuring myself that it was still there. They believed they had already won. They believed the trash can was the most memorable part of the day. They were wrong. Before the night was over, everyone in that room would learn a truth my late husband had prepared years earlier, and the laughter that echoed through the reception hall would disappear faster than any of them could imagine. From my seat near the back of the reception hall, I had a perfect view of everything. Funny how life works that way. The people who try hardest to push you aside often end up giving you the clearest perspective. A string quartet played near the dance floor while guests found their places. Crystal glasses reflected the soft light from the chandeliers. Servers moved between tables carrying plates of filet mignon, roasted vegetables, and warm dinner rolls. It was elegant, expensive, carefully planned, and in many ways, I had helped make all of it possible. Over the past year, I had written more checks than I cared to count. When Ryan and Vanessa wanted the upgraded venue, I helped. When the florist raised her prices, I helped. When unexpected costs appeared 2 months before the wedding, I helped again. I never viewed it as a burden. Ryan was my only child. Seeing him happy had always mattered more to me than numbers on a bank statement. As I watched the newlyweds move from table to table greeting guests, memories drifted through my mind. I remembered the first time Ryan brought Vanessa to my home. She had arrived carrying a homemade pie and a bright smile. She called me Miss Helen even after I told her she could simply call me Helen. She asked questions about family traditions. She listened carefully when I spoke. At least I thought she did. Looking back, I realized something uncomfortable. Vanessa had always been excellent at studying people. She knew exactly what to say, exactly when to smile, exactly how to appear thoughtful. The changes had come slowly enough that I ignored them. A canceled lunch here, a forgotten phone call there, then holiday plans that somehow excluded me, family photographs where I seemed to disappear from the center and drift farther toward the edges. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious, just 1,000 tiny moments that became impossible to ignore once they were added together. Across the room, I noticed Vanessa speaking with two bridesmaids. They glanced toward me and laughed. One of them covered her mouth, pretending to hide it. Vanessa did not bother pretending. She simply smiled and continued talking. I lowered my eyes and stirred the ice in my water glass. Years ago, that kind of behavior would have ruined my evening. Now it simply confirmed what I already knew. The wedding coordinator approached my table carrying a clipboard. She looked nervous. "Mrs. Carter," she said quietly, "I wanted to apologize about earlier." I looked up. "There is no need." She hesitated. "Actually, there is. I thought someone should know that the seating change was specifically requested." Her voice dropped even lower. The staff was uncomfortable with it. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I gave her a small smile. "Thank you for telling me." She seemed relieved and quickly returned to work. The confirmation did not hurt as much as I expected. Deep down, I had already known. Still, hearing it from someone else removed the final excuse. No misunderstanding. No accident. No harmless joke. Just intention. Pure and simple. A few minutes later, Ryan walked over carrying a drink. "You doing okay, Mom?" he asked. His tone was casual, almost distracted. I studied his face. He looked happy, comfortable, completely unaware of how much had changed. "I am fine," I replied. "That is good." He nodded and glanced toward Vanessa. "I know she likes to joke around. Do not take things personally." Then he walked away before I could answer. I watched him disappear into the crowd. The little boy I raised would have never allowed someone to treat another person that way. Somewhere along the road to adulthood, he had learned that keeping the peace was easier than standing up for what was right. I reached into my purse and touched the sealed envelope once again. The paper felt smooth beneath my fingertips. My late husband had insisted I keep it safe. At the time, I never imagined I would need it. Now, as laughter echoed through the reception hall and conversations flowed around me, I realized the moment was getting closer. Much closer than anyone in that room suspected. The band began playing a slow jazz number, while servers cleared dinner plates from the tables. Around me, conversations blended into a steady hum. People laughed, raised glasses, and celebrated what they believed was the beginning of a perfect future. I sat quietly and watched. The older I became, the more I realized that people reveal themselves most clearly when they think they have nothing left to lose. Vanessa certainly looked comfortable. She moved through the reception hall like someone who had finally reached the destination she had spent years pursuing. Every smile seemed practiced. Every laugh arrived at exactly the right moment. Most of the guests adored her. Why would they not? She knew how to create the appearance of warmth, the appearance of kindness, the appearance of family values. The reality was something else entirely. As I watched her, another memory surfaced. About 8 months before the wedding, I had invited Ryan and Vanessa to dinner at my house. It was a simple evening. Pot roast, mashed potatoes, apple pie, the kind of meal my husband used to love. At one point, Ryan stepped outside to answer a phone call. Vanessa remained in the kitchen with me. She had been scrolling through real estate listings on her phone. Suddenly, she asked an odd question. "Do you ever think about downsizing?" At the time, I smiled and shrugged. "Not really." She continued stirring her coffee. "A house that size must be difficult for one person." The comment seemed harmless then. Looking back, I understood what she was measuring. Not my comfort, my assets, my options, my future value. The pieces fit together now, one after another, like puzzle pieces that had spent years hidden in different rooms. My thoughts were interrupted when an elderly gentleman approached my table. His name was Walter Bennett. He had worked alongside my late husband for nearly 20 years. We had not seen each other in several months. "Helen," he said warmly, "mind if I sit for a minute?" "Not at all." He lowered himself carefully into the chair beside me. For several moments, we simply watched the reception together. Then he leaned slightly closer. "I have been meaning to ask how you have been holding up." The question was sincere. That alone felt unusual. "Some days are easier than others," I admitted. Walter nodded. "Your husband worried about you." I turned toward him. "Worried? Not in the way you think." He glanced toward the dance floor where Ryan and Vanessa were posing for photographs. A few years before he passed, he told me something. He said Helen always sees the best in people, sometimes even when they do not deserve it. A faint smile touched my face. That sounded exactly like my husband. Walter continued. He respected that about you. But he also wanted to make sure you would be protected. My fingers tightened slightly around my glass. Protected from what? Walter hesitated. From anyone who might confuse kindness with weakness. Before I could ask another question, the master of ceremonies stepped onto the small stage and tapped the microphone. Guests began turning their attention toward the front of the room. It was almost time for speeches. Walter rose from his chair. Just remember something, he said quietly. Your husband planned carefully, much more carefully than people realize. Then he walked away. I sat very still after that. The envelope inside my purse suddenly felt heavier. Across the room, Ryan wrapped his arm around Vanessa while photographers captured another series of smiling images. Neither of them noticed me watching. Neither of them noticed that the evening was beginning to shift. The reception still looked beautiful. The music still played. The guests still laughed. Yet beneath the polished surface, something important had already changed. For the first time all night, I no longer felt alone. And for the first time, I began to understand exactly why my husband had insisted that I keep the envelope sealed until the right moment arrived. The master of ceremonies welcomed everyone and invited a series of family members and friends to share a few words about the newly married couple. One by one, they approached the microphone. Stories were told. Glasses were raised. Laughter drifted through the room. From a distance, it looked like the kind of evening people remember fondly for years. Yet I found myself paying less attention to the speeches and more attention to the people listening to them. Vanessa sat perfectly poised beside Ryan, smiling at exactly the right moments. She squeezed his hand whenever someone mentioned family, loyalty, or commitment. The performance was flawless. I almost admired the effort. Almost. As another speaker stepped away from the microphone, I excused myself and headed toward the hallway outside the ballroom. I needed a few minutes away from the noise. The corridor was quiet except for the distant sound of music filtering through the walls. Family photographs from the country club's history decorated the hallway. I paused beside one of the windows overlooking the gardens. The evening sun had begun to sink lower across the hills. For a brief moment, I thought about my husband. He would have loved the view. He always appreciated simple things. A peaceful landscape. A good conversation. A family gathered together. The thought made me smile. Then voices drifted around the corner. I recognized one immediately. Vanessa. Instinctively, I remained where I was. I had no intention of eavesdropping, but their conversation carried clearly through the nearly empty hallway. Honestly, she took it better than I expected, Vanessa said. One of her bridesmaids laughed. I thought she was going to cry. Me too, Vanessa replied. But she never does anything. That is the thing about Helen. She just sits there and takes it. The women laughed softly. I remained still. At least now everyone understands the dynamic, Vanessa continued. Ryan and I are starting our own life. We cannot keep organizing everything around his mother forever. Another voice asked, what about the house? There was a short pause. One step at a time, Vanessa answered. That place is worth a fortune. Once Ryan convinces her it is too much for her to manage alone, she will sell. Then things become much easier. My expression did not change. Years earlier, those words would have shattered me. Now they simply confirmed what I had slowly begun to suspect. The house my husband and I built together was not viewed as a home. It was viewed as an opportunity. I quietly stepped away before they rounded the corner. By the time I returned to the reception hall, my pulse had steadied completely. Something important had happened in that hallway. Not because I learned anything entirely new, but because uncertainty finally disappeared. Doubt can be exhausting. Certainty is surprisingly peaceful. Back inside, guests were applauding another speech. Ryan caught sight of me and waved. I waved back. He smiled, completely unaware of the conversation that had taken place minutes earlier. For a moment, I felt a familiar ache. Not because of Vanessa, because of him. Somewhere along the way, my son had stopped asking himself difficult questions. He had accepted comfortable explanations instead. It was easier to believe everyone was joking than to recognize when someone was being cruel. Easier to avoid conflict than defend what mattered. I returned to my chair and carefully opened my purse. The envelope rested exactly where I had left it. I traced one finger along the sealed edge. Inside were documents my husband had instructed me never to reveal unless I absolutely had to. For years I believed that day would never come. As the applause faded and the master of ceremonies announced that a few final speeches would soon begin, I looked toward the stage and realized the moment my husband had prepared for was no longer somewhere in the future. It had arrived. As guests settled back into their seats, dessert plates began appearing across the reception hall. The atmosphere remained light and celebratory. Small conversations floated from table to table. Someone laughed near the dance floor. A photographer moved through the crowd capturing candid moments that would eventually fill albums and social media posts. Looking around, it would have been impossible for most people to recognize that beneath the polished surface, several lives were quietly approaching a crossroads. I sat with my hands folded in my lap and thought about the day my husband had first shown me the envelope. It had been nearly 4 years earlier. We were sitting on the back porch of our home, watching a summer thunderstorm roll across the hills. He had always loved storms, not because they were dangerous, but because they reminded him that even the strongest things eventually passed. That evening, he carried a small folder from his office and placed it on the table between us. "There may come a day when you need this," he had said. I remember laughing softly. "You make it sound like some kind of secret mission." He smiled but did not laugh. "Promise me something, Helen." His voice had been unusually serious. "If that day ever comes, do not hesitate. Do not explain. Do not argue. Just protect yourself." At the time, I thought he was being overly cautious. My husband spent decades building a successful business. Planning came naturally to him. He anticipated problems long before they appeared. I was the opposite. I believed most situations could be solved through patience and conversation. Looking back, I realized he understood something I did not. Kindness works best when it is met with good intentions. When it is met with manipulation, it becomes a target. A server refilled my water glass, pulling me back to the present. Across the room, Ryan and Vanessa were greeting relatives from out of state. Vanessa looked radiant in her wedding gown. Ryan appeared relaxed and happy. For a brief moment, I wondered what my husband would think if he could see them now. The answer came quickly. He would be disappointed. Not angry. Not bitter. Simply disappointed. He believed character mattered more than appearances. Always had. My attention shifted when Walter returned to my table carrying a cup of coffee. "Mind if I join you again?" he asked. "Please do." He sat down carefully and glanced around the room. "I have known your family a long time, Helen." "You have? Then you know I would not say this lightly." I waited. Walter lowered his voice. "Your husband updated several arrangements during his final year. Most people never knew about it." I felt my pulse quicken slightly. "What kind of arrangements?" He looked directly at me. "The kind designed to make sure respect remained a condition, not an expectation." Before I could respond, the master of ceremonies returned to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced cheerfully, "we have reached one of the most meaningful parts of the evening. Family remarks." Applause spread throughout the room. Several guests turned toward Ryan and Vanessa with smiling faces. I noticed Vanessa glance around confidently, already expecting admiration. Ryan adjusted his jacket and exchanged a few words with her. Neither of them looked concerned. Why would they? They believed the evening was following the script they had written. Walter stood and placed a hand gently on my shoulder. "Your husband trusted your judgment," he said. "Do not forget that." Then he returned to his table. I remained seated for a moment longer. Slowly, I opened my purse and removed the envelope. The cream-colored paper looked ordinary. There was nothing dramatic about it. No bold markings. No warning labels. Just my husband's handwriting across the front. "For Helen, when the time is right." I stared at those words and felt a calm settle over me unlike anything I had experienced all day. Not triumph. Not revenge. Certainty. The uncertainty was finally gone. The questions were finally answered. As the microphone was passed to the next speaker and guests turned their attention toward the stage, I rested the envelope on my lap and realized that the time my husband had written about years ago had finally arrived. The next speaker stepped away from the microphone to warm applause. A few guests dabbed their eyes after hearing a sentimental story about Ryan as a child. Others laughed at memories from college. The atmosphere remained light, comfortable, completely unaware of the shift that was taking place inside me. I sat quietly with the envelope resting on my lap. For years it had remained sealed in a drawer in my home office. Sometimes I forgot it was even there. Other times I would notice it while organizing paperwork and hear my husband's voice in the back of my mind reminding me to leave it untouched. He had never been dramatic. That was one of the reasons people trusted him. If he considered something important enough to prepare for years in advance, there was always a reason. The master of ceremonies announced another family speaker. As guests turned toward the stage, my phone vibrated softly inside my purse. I glanced down at the screen. It was a text message from a name I recognized immediately. Daniel Mercer, my husband's attorney. The timing caught my attention. Daniel had been handling legal matters for our family for more than 15 years. I opened the message. It was brief. I understand tonight may be the night. If you need me, I am available. I stared at the words for several seconds. Then I looked toward the stage where Ryan and Vanessa sat smiling beneath soft lights and floral arrangements. Neither of them noticed me. Neither of them noticed the message. Slowly, I typed a response. Please be ready. Less than a minute later, his reply appeared. Understood. I slipped the phone back into my purse. The feeling that settled over me was not excitement. It was relief. For months I had sensed that something was wrong, but lacked certainty. Then came the comments about my house, the growing distance, the small humiliations, the conversation in the hallway. Now there was no uncertainty left. A server stopped beside my table. Would you like coffee, ma'am? She asked kindly. Yes, thank you. She poured a fresh cup and smiled before moving on. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug and watched the newlyweds from across the room. Vanessa leaned toward Ryan and whispered something that made him laugh. For a moment, I remembered another evening many years ago. Ryan had been 12 years old. He came home from school upset because another boy had been teased during lunch. I remember asking him what happened. He told me he sat beside the boy so he would not have to eat alone. I had never been prouder. That memory hurt more than anything that happened at the wedding. Not because Ryan had changed overnight. People rarely do. Change happens slowly. One compromise at a time. One excuse at a time. One silence at a time. Eventually, the person you once knew becomes difficult to recognize. My thoughts were interrupted when Walter passed behind my chair. Without stopping, he quietly placed something beside my plate. It was a folded note. Curious, I opened it. Inside was a single sentence written in his careful handwriting. Time. The speeches were almost finished. The formal photographs were nearly done. The schedule for the evening was moving exactly as planned, at least according to everyone else. Because what none of them realized was that another plan had been waiting quietly for years, and in only a short while, it would finally begin. The final family speech was announced just as the reception lights dimmed slightly to create a more intimate atmosphere. Guests quieted down and turned their attention toward the front of the ballroom. I could feel a subtle shift in energy, the kind that happens when an event moves from celebration into reflection. Ryan stood first. He adjusted his jacket, smiled at the audience, and tapped the microphone lightly. I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight, he began. His voice carried easily across the room. This has been the most important day of my life, and I am grateful to share it with all of you. Applause followed. Vanessa reached up and gently touched his arm, encouraging him with a warm smile. From the outside, they looked like the perfect couple. Everything about them was carefully composed. Ryan continued speaking about gratitude, about family, about the future he was building. Guests nodded approvingly. A few smiled toward me when he mentioned his mother. I returned a calm expression, though I noticed he did not look in my direction while saying it. That small detail did not surprise me anymore. When Ryan finished, Vanessa stepped forward. Her presence immediately shifted the room. She had a natural confidence that made people pay attention without realizing why. I want to thank everyone as well, she said softly. Her tone was gentle, almost emotional. Today means so much to Ryan and me. She paused, letting the moment settle. Especially to our families. Another wave of polite applause moved through the crowd. I watched her carefully. There was always something precise about the way she chose her words, as if every sentence had been tested beforehand. She spoke about unity, about building a new life, about blending families. The audience responded warmly. At one point, she even mentioned me directly. We are especially grateful for Helen, who has supported us in so many ways. Several guests turned to look at me with approving smiles. I nodded politely. The irony was not lost on me. Support meant different things to different people. As Vanessa continued speaking, I felt my attention shift inward. The envelope inside my purse felt heavier than before, almost as if time itself had condensed inside it. I thought about everything that had happened that evening. The seat that was replaced, the laughter that followed, the conversations I overheard, the small but deliberate decisions that led to this exact moment. Each one had been building towards something none of them could see yet. Vanessa finished her speech with a graceful smile. The room applauded warmly. Ryan stepped back beside her and kissed her forehead. Cameras flashed. Guests cheered. The master of ceremonies returned to the microphone and announced that the formal portion of the evening was nearly complete. Approached. I extended my hand, and after a brief pause, he handed me the microphone. The room fell into complete silence. I looked out at the crowd, at the guests, at my son, at his bride, and for the first time that entire evening, I no longer felt like someone sitting at the back of the room. I felt like someone about to be heard. The morning light in the city arrived with a muted calm, stretching across the familiar streets that had quietly carried the weight of recent events. The main character moved through the early hours with a steady focus, reviewing every detail that had unfolded in the previous stages of the journey. Nothing about the situation felt random anymore. Every connection, every delay, and every unexpected turn now appeared to form a pattern that demanded careful attention rather than quick reaction. In a quiet workspace filled with soft ambient noise, the team gathered once again, continuing their methodical review of gathered information, refining their understanding of what had already been confirmed and what still remained uncertain. Each person contributed observations in a structured way, ensuring that no assumption went unchallenged and no detail was left without verification. The discussion was not rushed. Instead, it followed a deliberate rhythm, as if everyone understood that clarity would only come through patience and precision. Outside, the city continued its normal flow of traffic and routine movement, but inside the room, attention remained fully anchored to the task at hand. The main character organized the latest findings into a clear sequence, identifying key points that had emerged over the previous phase and mapping them against earlier observations. Small inconsistencies that once seemed insignificant now stood out with greater clarity, suggesting that the situation was evolving in ways that required a broader perspective. Rather than focusing on immediate conclusions, the group shifted their attention toward building a more complete framework of understanding, connecting each piece of information with careful reasoning. As the day progressed, communication channels remained open, with periodic updates arriving from different sources that expanded the scope of the discussion. Each update was evaluated calmly, with attention given to both direct information and underlying implications. The main character emphasized the importance of maintaining consistency in interpretation, ensuring that no single piece of data was taken out of context. By midday, the structure of their approach had become more refined, transitioning from reactive analysis to a more stable and forward-looking strategy. The team began outlining possible directions based on verified patterns, focusing on logical progression rather than speculation. Every proposed idea was tested against known facts, and only those that aligned with established understanding were carried forward. This disciplined approach gradually reduced uncertainty, replacing fragmented assumptions with a clearer sense of direction. In the quiet moments between discussions, the main character reviewed personal notes, tracing the development of events from the beginning to the present point. The timeline revealed subtle shifts that had gone unnoticed at first, now forming a coherent narrative when viewed in sequence. These insights helped shape the next steps, allowing decisions to be made with greater confidence and stability. As evening approached, the group consolidated their findings into a unified summary, marking the transition from exploration to preparation for the next phase. There was no sense of urgency, only a steady awareness that progress depended on continued attention to detail and disciplined execution. The environment remained focused and calm, with each participant fully engaged in maintaining the integrity of the work. The main character concluded the session by organizing the remaining tasks into a clear structure for the following cycle, ensuring that every unresolved element had a designated path for review. Outside, the city lights began to glow softly, signaling the end of another day of steady progress. Inside, the foundation had been laid for what would come next, built not on assumption, but on careful analysis and consistent understanding.